Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you. Today I rise to contribute to speak on, of course, the level crossing removal motion. I've had many speakers before me, and I'm very grateful to the Deputy Premier for the lovely trip down memory lane earlier. And of course, unfortunately, there were some dark times in our history, those handful of years where we sat opposite on the side of the House and had to watch the successive premiers cancel contracts, and certainly at the last election, those opposite didn't even bother to come up with any public transport policy and plans out in the western suburbs, whether they be funded, underfunded or not. And Deputy Speaker, we have a long list of achievements and commitments that have happened in the West, and in particularly in Melton, and I delight in the opportunity to inform and in most cases remind the House. Of course, it's not only about convenience, it's also about easing our roads burden, and the level crossings at Hopkins Road at Truganina, Ferris Road, Coburns Road and Exford Road in Melton are all slated for removal and to be completed by 2026. And it's not just about smoother traffic flow, it's about enhancing the quality of life for over the 73,000 vehicles and vehicle drivers that are navigating these routes on a daily basis, and obviously to make the place a lot safer. And as I say, that number of 73,000 is projected to grow rapidly as the population grows in Melton. Of course, removing level crossings makes our train rides smoother, makes our roads clearer, and of course it makes our stations function better. And of course, we're not just talking about hypothetical change into the distant future. This is a reality that will be achieved by 2026 out in that Melton corridor and also in the electorate of Koroit. And of course, it's a whole 2 years sooner than what was previously anticipated, and I thank the Minister for bringing this project forward by 2 years and the importance of that. I've got to say, in my past history as a paramedic, I wish back in the 1980s and 90s we had level crossing removals, because I don't know whether anyone else in this House has done it, but one of my first train incidents as a paramedic working out in the Sunshine branch was a pedestrian versus train at the Anderson Road level crossing in Sunshine. And unfortunately, when pedestrians take on trains, they generally lose. And this was an elderly gentleman that had been down the local shop to pick up some kerosene to put into his heater to keep him warm. And on the way back, he walked across the Anderson Road level crossing, and unfortunately, he was struck by a freight train. We had to respond from the Sunshine ambulance station, which was only probably a kilometre away, and this gentleman was deceased under the train. Of course, our job in those days was to retrieve the person from under the train, and one thing that you make yourself sure of, and that is you have the train driver near you when you're under a train trying to drag out a body from under the train, because you don't want the train to move when you're under it and create more fatalities. But I've attended many train fatalities as a paramedic in the 80s and 90s, and all of those level crossings that I attended fatalities at in the western suburbs, in particular in the Sunshine St Albans area, have been removed. Furlong Road, Main Road West, as I say, Anderson Road, and then we talk about the Deer Park level crossings, as the member for Koroit alluded to. And I've got to say to you, this is a fantastic project, probably one of the best projects that has ever been introduced by any government, because it directly saves lives in many different ways, not just by protecting people crossing level crossings, but also car accidents with trains, but also just the safety and the movement of cars in those particular areas. Along with the removal of the level crossings in Melton, all of our level crossings are on the major road grids. We have 3 roads in Melton that are key roads that all of our other smaller roads run off, and the 3 level crossings obviously happen to be in those particular roads. But notwithstanding that, we are building other infrastructure in Melton that will rely on these level crossings being removed, and I allude to the new hospital that commences being built next year, and we're in the process of, we've shortlisted 2 building consortia, and a tender process will occur later this year to determine who the builder will be, and that building will commence next year. That hospital is only down the road from the Ferris Road level crossing, probably by about a kilometre. So this is how important that level crossing in Ferris Road, which will be the first one in Melton to be removed. And there's already work that's commenced in regard to all 3 level crossings, geotechnical and surveying work that's going on at the moment. And as I say, I thank the Minister for bringing this project forward by 2 years. We also have, as I alluded to, the hospital, the community group that was the consultative group has done all of their work, and through their work they have contributed to what will happen in regard to the relationship of the level crossing, the traffic flow and the build of the hospital. And I thank that community consultative group that did all that work in regard to the hospital and the relationship to the level crossings. Of course, our commitment to removing level crossings for us on this side of the chamber really should have been met with enthusiasm and support from those opposite, because it is a public safety issue, and I alluded to that with my history in ambulance. And of course, dangerous or congested crossings at their best, are an inconvenience, and at their worst, it kills people. And we've got evidence of that in most of those level crossings that have been removed, where there's probably been a number of fatalities, and some worse than others. And of course, I know it's not a great look for the opposition to side with government on projects, but I would have thought that this is a project that you enthusiastically side with the deliverer of these projects on the basis that it is a safety issue for the general community, regardless of whether they live in Melbourne or whether they live in rural Victoria. I'm sure rural Victorians travel around Melbourne when they come to Melbourne for a visit. And while some have alluded to the fact that 25% of the population live in rural Victoria, that's fine. But we see that the greatest volume of traffic through level crossings are through these high density areas of Melbourne and major growth areas of Melbourne. And of course, rural Victorians come to Melbourne regularly. Of course, no other party has committed to removing dangerous level crossings, and in fact, Deputy Speaker, at times those opposite have opposed certain level crossings being removed, and that's disappointing that they've done that through different projects and different sites, I should say. And Skyrail was a clear example of that some years ago. And the member for Bentley's at the table here, and he would remember it very well in regard to the battle over the Skyrail. Of course, if you Google what is the most beautiful train station in Melbourne, the answer is Flinders Street, which I'm a bit surprised about. But of course, if you scroll down a little bit, Cobblebank comes up, which is in my electorate. And Cobblebank being a new station, we opened it up in 2019. It was one of the first things that I did after being elected in 2018. It's a lovely station. It delivers ticketing office and holding cell for PSOs. It has a parketeer cage, which my staff tell me is somewhere where you can park your bikes. I wouldn't have called it a parketeer cage, but anyway, it's got male and female accessible toilets and accessible pedestrian overpasses, lifts, ramps, all these new modern stations that we're building, and it is a fantastic station. It's a popular station. It's got a big car park, and we've added additional car parking spaces to it in just recent times. So that's been fantastic. We've also duplicated 18 kilometres between Deer Park and Melton, 18 kilometres of the track between Deer Park and Melton. And of course, as part of the Western Rail plan, it will be integrated into the Metro Rail network at some stage. But Deputy Speaker, you know that what needs to happen before, there was a big debate recently about electrification, or big suggestion that it wasn't going to happen out into the west. A lot more things have to be put in place before we can even start anything in regard to electrification to Melton. We've got to free up capacity out of Sunshine. We're upgrading the Melton line by $650 million injections to upgrade that line. Longer platforms, longer trains, higher capacity, more passengers, greater regularity of train services. So we'll continue to build and grow on not only level crossing removals, but providing good, reliable rail services to the west along the Melton line, through the Melton electorate, through the Koroit electorate. And I acknowledge the member for Koroit for her contribution. It was fantastic to hear her contribution, in particular the passion around, no the level crossing removals at Hopkins Road and Mount Derrimut Road, and I commend this motion to the House.